The cool thing about pinball video games is that we don't have to worry about faulty and dodgy flippers and getting the ball stuck somewhere between the glass and the table itself. Time Scanner was originally developed for arcades by Sega and released in 1987, offering 4 different and awesome tables representing different time zones, and each zone is made up of 2 sections. When the ball hits the bottom of the table, the screen freezes and scrolls down, and vice versa. If I recall correctly, Time Scanner was my very first experience with a virtual pinball game, and I was immediately addicted to the genre. Its superb music got my complete attention right in the first couple of seconds, so by 1989 I was obviously addicted to the ZX Spectrum version that surprisingly got also that awesome soundtrack playing in the background. Released around December, Paris-Dakar got me hooked during the following years, trying to reach the finish line in this one-of-a-kind game that randomly generates completely different stages every time you start the race. For that, we have this basic but groundbreaking roadbook that includes all the notes and directions for the player to take to safely navigate his way through these mazes till the checkered flag. And we must not forget to reset the partial kilometer counter after every change of direction to get it right. Believe me, the sense of accomplishment in this game is huge, and crossing the finish line of every single stage is already a true victory. It unfolds in 3 stages, being each step an incredible challenge, not only in what the roadbook is concerned, but also in relation to the well-being of our vehicle, like the level of water, state of the gearbox and the fuel tank. Along the way, there are areas of supply and repair for us to stop, but even with all these precautions, reaching the end of every stage intact and well classified is almost impossible, but achievable. Simply brilliant. This is probably my favorite action puzzle game ever. Rock and Roll, originally developed and published by Rainbow Arts for the Amiga in 1989, and with an awesome soundtrack by my all-time favorite composer, Chris Hulsbeck. But I got first addicted to the ZX Spectrum amazing 128K port by Imagitech Design, that astonishingly offered also amazing music playing in the background, compliments of Barry Leach, responsible for such things as the original soundtrack of the recent Horizon Chase Turbo. This is a huge game where we control a ball and try to reach the end of each level, avoiding ventilators, magnets, arrows and other objects that simply drains the player's energy. It's not an easy task, but it's a highly enjoyable one. The ball physics are just right, so we have a good control over it and can easily anticipate annoying situations. The Amiga original version was one of my early reviews for the channel, so if you want to know more, feel free to click on the annotation at the top right of the screen. This game was initially intended to be known as The Name of the Rose, but not being able to acquire the rights for Umberto Eco's novel, the Spanish designer Paco Menendez and Opera Soft were forced to change its title to La Abadia Del Crimen. Just like Where Time Stood Still, La Abadia del Crimen, that roughly translates to The Abbey of Crime, was only available for the 128K ZX Spectrum and in Spanish language, so needless to say that it failed to grab commercial success. Even so, I managed to get hold of a copy, and 3 years later the full game was even bundled with the Spanish magazine Micro Hobby issue 215 on a cover tape that I still have in my possession. Check my complete history video for more details and curious facts about this incredible masterpiece from the golden age of Spanish software. I've always been a fan of off-road related stuff, so when I first saw Enduro Racer at the arcades, my eyes just popped and I was immediately in love. Sadly, the cabinet where I used to play it was the stand-up version and not the sit-down replica bike similar to Hang-On. It ended up ported a year later to a few 8-bit systems, and by then I was a proud and lucky owner of a ZX Spectrum 128K plus 2A. That was a system that I believe to have received the best home version of Enduro Racer. And that's probably why no one talks about this masterpiece by Yu Suzuki and his AM2 team. So when the time came to produce the ZX Spectrum and Atari ST conversions of Enduro Racer, Activision handed the job over to Giga Games, whose previous work with Nightmare Rally showed to be extremely important for their next venture. For that, all they had as reference was a VHS tape of someone playing the arcade original, and as stated by Alan Laird in an interview a few years back, "I don't think I ever saw an Enduro Racer machine in real life." I recall organizing during summer vacations some ZX Spectrum championships and inviting a bunch of friends to participate, and Enduro Racer was one of those that would always be present. I really miss those days. People would sit around the good old Specky waiting for their turn to play. One of the most entertaining Spanish games I've ever played, and apparently was inspired by the 1980 arcade game entitled Rally X, which I never had the chance to try cause at that time I was just 5 years old and didn't know what an arcade cabinet was all about, and this type of things were quite uncommon back then around the place I lived in. So in 1988, Toposoft developed this arcade driving and puzzle game, in where we control a buggy trying to collect 6 pieces in the form of question marks, unveiling an image of a vehicle on the bottom left of the screen. But be careful, cause behind those question marks, other surprises can be unleashed. And besides other hazards, be aware of mines and oil that can destroy and make you lose the control over your vehicle. This simple concept turns this jam into a highly addictive little game, and it practically passed unnoticed. By the way, a funny thing about the cover of Rock'n'Roller is that in the Spectrum and MSX versions, the letters on the stop sign are inverted. Someone was really wasted or in a bad mood. I also own the Kicks re-release of the graphic adventure of Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, but again, I prefer to play those type of point-and-click games on the PC. With that said, the action game of the Last Crusade was one of my most played games since it was released in 1989, first on my ZX Spectrum 128K, then on the Amiga, and many years later on the Mega Drive. It was developed by TRTX and published by US Gold, and obviously based on my favorite Indiana Jones movie. The action game version of The Last Crusade is a basic platformer that received really poor reviews, and I agree, cause there are a lot other way better platform games miles away from this one. But as a huge fan of the Man in the Hat, I somehow got right away overwhelmed by it. Its difficulty, the puzzles, the exploration, and the simple crack of Indy's whip transported me to that adventurous setting. What a feeling! This is one of those hidden gems on the system. It has that Metroid feeling, with arcade platform shoot-'em-up frenetic action that was published by Martech Games and developed by The Light, a fictional name for a real company known as Creative Reality. In this one, we assume the role of Rex, a rhino obsessed by ecology, with this one and only mission of destroying a fortress or factory that is polluting his home planet. Gameplay is hard, but amazingly addictive, and I only wished that there was music playing in the background. The non-linear Metroid-style gameplay is what really impressed me back in the day, cause by then I was yet to play around with an NES. So, along with the also amazing Antiread released a couple of years prior, Rex was where I would immerse myself in such overwhelming new experiences that this unique style of gameplay would provide, if well structured. If you've enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, to subscribe, to click on that bell icon, to share this video and to support the channel through Patreon if you're feeling generous. Thank you very much for watching and I'll see you all in my next video. Cheers!